Leopard geckos are arguably the best first pet reptile, and are an amazing pet reptile in general. My name is Hunter Houck, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you everything you need to know to make sure that your leopard gecko lives a happy, healthy, long life. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to or back to the channel. My name is Hunter Houck, and I make reptile and amphibian videos every week. Today I'll be teaching you all about leopard gecko care. Now, at the bottom of this video, either in the thing where you can choose the time that you're watching, or in the description, there is a table of contents, so if there's a particular subject that you want to learn more about, or skip to, or rewatch, definitely check it out so that you can see what you need to see, or if you haven't done a ton of research yet, I would really recommend watching the whole care video because I have 7 pages of notes here, so you're gonna learn a lot. Now, let's get into it. I also want to let you know that I wrote a care guide that goes along with this, so if you want to read all about leopard gecko care, definitely head to careguides.hunterhouck.com and click on the leopard gecko care guide. I have a variety of articles that will really help you follow along and learn everything you need to know as well. One last thing, if you do enjoy this and you want to support me to help me make more of these videos, you can head to shop.hunterhouck.com, that's my merch, and I sell stuff like that leopard gecko mug right there with my leopard gecko patent on it. It really helps me make these videos, so if you enjoy it, be sure to subscribe and check something out at shop.hunterhouck.com. Alright, without further ado, let's talk about leopard gecko care. I want to say, if you see me looking down or to the side a little bit, I'm going to try to look at you, but like I said, I have 7 pages of notes, so I will have to look at my bullet points a little bit just so I can make sure I'm giving you the best possible information. First off, we'll discuss feeding your leopard gecko. I'll cover everything from food choices, the different insects that you're going to feed, to supplements, to sizes of food, and frequency of feeding. Now, the most important thing I want to make very clear is your leopard gecko should have fresh, clean water available at all times. If you're using tap water and your city water has chlorine in it, be sure to get some ReptiSafe and put that in the water according to the directions on the bottle. That way it'll get rid of all the chlorine and chloramines and other toxins to make sure that it is safe for your leopard gecko. I will have all the products that I talked about linked in the description in the link that says Leopard Gecko Shopping Guide, so definitely check that out so that you can see all of those links at once, and it'll have multiple links so that you can buy them at Amazon or Chewy or wherever else you think you want to get them from. Leopard geckos are insectivores, which means that they can only eat live insects. You shouldn't feed them freeze-dried insects or dehydrated insects or anything like that unless there's like an absolute emergency and that's the only thing you can get. They are insectivores, so live insects have to make up their diet. Just like any animal or us, leopard geckos need a variety of foods to stay mentally stimulated and healthy. Just one insect isn't going to give them all of the nutrients that they need, so I would recommend feeding a variety of at least 3 different feeder insects. Now, leopard geckos can't eat just any insect. Here are a few that make great staples in their diet. Dubia roaches are my favorite staple insect for leopard geckos. They are high in protein and low in chitin, which is what makes up exoskeletons, so they're very nutritious and they are easy to digest. Next, there are superworms. They are very nutritious, but they're also higher in fat and chitin, so they're not quite as easy to digest, and they do have a little more fat, but if you need to get your leopard gecko to gain weight, then superworms might be the right insect for you. Now, there are black soldier fly larvae, and you will see these also called BSFL, or phoenix worms, or nutrigrubs. They're all the same insect. They're black soldier fly larvae. And they are super high in calcium, which is great, but they are super low in protein, so they shouldn't be your main source of nutrients, but I think that they are a great insect to mix into your leopard gecko's diet. Now there are mealworms, and these used to be the major staple in the hobby, but we've learned that they don't have a ton of nutrients, and they also have a lot of chitin, so I really wouldn't recommend making these the main part of your leopard gecko's diet. And then there are crickets, which they have some nutrients, but they are kind of expensive. They die really easily, and you have to feed a lot of them, and they smell super bad, so I never buy crickets. I always joke that I haven't bought crickets in like 3 years for my reptiles, and they've been the happiest 3 years of my life. That said, crickets are easy to find, so if it's an emergency and you can't get any feeder insect, crickets are better than nothing. So those are all like the staple insects that you'll want to feed your leopard gecko, but there are some more treats that we'll talk about later on. Like I said, out of all of those, my favorite is the dubia roach. I think dubia roaches are the best because they live a long time. You can get them in a variety of sizes. They're pretty easy to find. They are a little more expensive, but if you buy them in bulk, they're not going to be bad. And most importantly, they don't have an odor like superworms and crickets do. That is a big one. I order all of my feeder insects, not just dubia roaches, from dubiaroaches.com, and they are not sponsoring this video or anything. I'm not being paid to say this, but I do have an affiliate link in the description, and if you use that, you can get 10% off of your first feeder insect order, so I would definitely recommend going there, putting in your email, and then they will send you a coupon that you can use for 10% off of your first order, and then they give me a little bit off of my next order, so it's really appreciated, and it's a great way to help support me while saving a lot of money off of your feeder insects. There are a few other feeder insects that make great treats for your leopard gecko, but not exactly the best staples. Waxworms are the first one, and they have a lot of nutrients, but the main nutrient is fat, which means your leopard gecko is probably going to love them. They are, well, there are a lot of nicknames for them that I won't say, but they are like candy for your leopard gecko. They're super high in fat, and your leopard gecko will probably love them, but they can also be addictive, so I would really recommend feeding them no more than once a month, just because if you feed them a lot, your leopard gecko is going to decide that they refuse to eat anything that is not a waxworm, and that is not good because you'll have a super fat leopard gecko that's lacking in a lot of nutrients. There are also hornworms, which are one of the most expensive feeder insects, but they're these beautiful blue insects, these beautiful blue worms, I should say, and they are super high in water. They don't have a ton of other nutrients, but they're super high in water. So if your leopard gecko seems a little dehydrated, I would recommend feeding some hornworms because they are super juicy and your leopard gecko will love them. Now, what size of insect should you feed your leopard gecko? That is a big, important question, and that depends on the size of your leopard gecko. Your leopard gecko should easily be able to chew and swallow any insect that you feed them. I would really recommend not feeding them anything wider than the length between their eyes. That's typically the general rule of thumb given by most leopard gecko keepers, and I found that that is a pretty reliable rule of thumb. Now let's talk about how often you should feed your leopard gecko. For very young leopard geckos, like hatchlings to a few months old, I would feed every single day. Once they become a juvenile, I would decrease that to every other day. For subadult or adult leopard geckos, I would recommend feeding twice a week or every 3 to 4 days. It's also important to note that you don't need to feed exactly on a schedule because that's going to make your leopard gecko a lot more picky because they might be like, okay, I'm only going to eat on these days, and then if you try to feed them a day early or something, they are not going to eat, and it also gets them in habits. You want to keep them mentally enriched, so I would recommend switching up the frequency of feeding occasionally. Now, of course, if your leopard gecko is getting too skinny or too overweight, then you can feed them more or less often. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you have a leopard gecko right now that you're just trying to learn more about, or are you thinking about getting a leopard gecko, or are you getting one soon? Let me know if you have any leopard geckos or if you're going to get them. Tell me about that in the comments down below. I would love to heart your comment and have a little bit of a conversation down there. I really love hearing from you guys. In captivity, unlike in the wild, your leopard gecko's food and insects are not going to be covered in soil, which this means that they're not going to be covered in minerals and vitamins. Instead, in captivity, it is our responsibility as the leopard gecko keepers to supplement that artificially by buying vitamins and minerals for them. This is called supplementation, and it's super important. Without it, your leopard gecko will develop irreversible medical conditions such as metabolic bone disease, hyperparathyroidism, or muscle twitches. But the good news is supplementation is super easy. What supplements do your leopard geckos need? That depends. The first supplement is calcium. Are you using UVB lighting in your leopard gecko's enclosure? UVB lighting allows your leopard gecko's body to produce vitamin D3. In turn, their liver uses the vitamin D3 to produce a hormone called calcitriol, which allows your leopard gecko essentially to absorb the calcium that you're giving to them. Now, leopard geckos don't need UVB, because their bodies can absorb synthetic vitamin D3 that you dust on their insects. That said, it's beneficial to give your leopard geckos UVB lighting, and I use it for both of mine. We will talk about that a little later in the enclosure setting of the video. If you are using UVB lighting in your enclosure, you should dust your leopard gecko's feeder insects in calcium powder without vitamin D3, since they're making their own because of the UVB lighting. I'll have all of these, like I said, linked in the Leopard Gecko shopping guide link in the description. If you are not using UVB lighting, you should supplement with calcium with vitamin D3, because that way your leopard gecko can produce the calcitriol to absorb the calcium that you're giving it. Be sure that you're using the right one, because a mix-up could lead to either D3 overdose or hypocalcemia. You should dust the feeder insects with calcium, with or without D3, depending on your lighting, at every feeding. So how do you actually dust them? I keep mine in a jar in the fridge with some holes in it, and you just dust it just like it's salt and pepper. You put it on there and then you'll shake it up at the end. It's easier with two hands. And then you pick up the dubia roach that you freed, and then you're good. The second supplement is a lot less complicated, and it's a multivitamin. It is, just like it sounds, a mix of different vitamins that your leopard gecko needs to be healthy. You should supplement these vitamins every 3 or 4 feedings instead of calcium. So at these feedings, don't use the calcium powder and just use the multivitamin instead, and then after that, go back to the normal calcium. I highly recommend using a multivitamin with beta-carotene instead of vitamin A, because your leopard gecko's body can use that beta-carotene to produce its own vitamin A, but it'll ensure that it won't get too much because it can just pee out the extra beta-carotene. If you're giving straight vitamin A though, it can't get rid of it when it goes to the bathroom, and that could cause an overdose. All of the brands of multivitamin that I have linked in the Leopard Gecko shopping kit use beta-carotene instead of vitamin A, so like I said, I would recommend purchasing one of those in that link. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. That's how you feed your leopard gecko. Now we're going to move on to your leopard gecko's enclosure. This is where they're going to be spending a lot of their life, so you want to make sure that it is awesome. There are a variety of ways to house your leopard gecko, and there isn't only one that is correct. That's the beauty of reptile keeping. Everyone has their own experience and opinions that affect how they keep their reptiles. As long as your gecko is thriving and not just surviving, you're doing it right. Some keepers, such as myself, prefer naturalistic or bioactive environments with natural materials, soil-based substrates, and live plants. While they are one of the most beautiful setups for your gecko, they're also the most difficult. I have made many videos of that sort, so I'll link one of them in the top right corner. This video, since many of you are new to leopard geckos, I'll be demonstrating my way to set up an easy and simple, yet wonderful and very enjoyable leopard gecko habitat. We're going to talk all about housing your leopard gecko, including the enclosure size, the decor, the substrate, the heating, the lighting, and all of that stuff, so definitely stick around. For Exoterra brand terrariums, which are the brand that most people tend to use, for juvenile leopard geckos, I would suggest that you use a 24 by 18 by 12 inch enclosure. For adults, I would suggest the 36 by 18 by 12 inch enclosure, which is about 34 gallons, but that doesn't have a ton of room to climb. So if you want something even better, I would suggest the 36 by 18 by 18 enclosure, which is taller and larger. Or if you prefer to use an aquarium, you can use a 20-gallon long aquarium for a juvenile, and for an adult, a 30 or preferably 40-gallon breeder aquarium. Make sure you use a proper lid so that they can't climb out. Leopard geckos need room to climb, period. I no longer support the long-term use of bins for housing leopard geckos. A lot of breeders tend to keep their leopard geckos in really small, short bins in rack-style setups, and I think that that is kind of sad because they don't have the space to mentally enrich themselves and climb, which is important for their health. They need that exercise. And while you can provide enough room to climb in a larger bin-style setup, I still don't recommend it just because it could trap too much humidity and you can't always provide proper lighting in a bin style setup. So glass or custom PVC or wood or anything like that is always going to be better than one of the cheap little bin setups. They're inexpensive, but they're also going to give your leopard gecko a little bit less quality of life. And as their keepers, it's our responsibility to make sure that their quality of life is as great as possible. We'll be right back to the video, but right now I just want to take a minute to say a huge thank you to Josh's Frogs for sponsoring this part of the video. So Josh's Frogs is a company that started out specializing in dart frogs, but now they sell all sorts of reptile and amphibian and fish and plant supplies. So if you have any of those things, definitely go check them out. I have a ton of plans from Josh's Frogs, and they are where I order probably 80% of my reptile supplies because they always have awesome prices, especially on Exoterras. Like the one that I'm using in this video that you'll see here in just a minute, I looked and I could not find it cheaper anywhere else. So yeah, it's awesome. I love Josh's Frogs. They are where I got my 2 Whites tree frogs from, and anytime I get to work with Josh's Frogs, it is an absolute blast. So thanks again to Josh's Frogs. Now let's go build that enclosure. So with that, we're gonna start building, and I've already filmed the clip of me building, so we're actually gonna jump over to a voiceover and I'll talk about that while I'm building the enclosure. Let's set up this enclosure. We're gonna be using a Fluker's heat mat in the size medium. We also need to use a thermostat for the heat mat. First, we're gonna put the heat mat underneath the tank, and off camera, I taped it to the bottom with aluminum foil tape. In this setup, I strongly advise that you do not use a heat bulb. Never use blue or red heat bulbs for any animals, as this can cause eye strain. On your thermostat, you're going to want to set the temperature to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It will stay within 3 degrees of this. This is the Vivo Sun thermostat, and I will have it linked in the Leopard Gecko shopping guide. Next, we are going to put the thermostat probe in behind the background. To do this, we're going to take off the top of the Exoterra. They come with cool clips so that you can easily take them off. And then we're going to pull out this foam background. That is one of the cool things about Exoterras. They come with a foam background, and while it doesn't always look the nicest, it's pre-installed and your leopard gecko can climb on it, so I think it's great. Now, you'll see it has cutouts at the bottom of the foam background, so we're going to want to thread the thermostat probe's cord through one of those cutouts. Now that the probe has been placed in that cutout, you can slide the background right back in just like you had it. Now, we're going to want to take the thermostat probe and put it right over the heat mat. We will secure it once we put in the substrate. Now that we've done that and the thermostat is over the heat mat, we can plug the heat mat into the thermostat. Now it's time to put in the substrate. The substrate is what covers the floor of the enclosure and what your leopard gecko will be walking and sitting on. I recommend paper towel or non-adhesive flooring material. Tile works too if you can get it cut in the proper size. In this enclosure, as you can see, I am using paper towel. This is super easy to clean, so that's what I'm using today. For adults, you can also use something such as Josh's Frogs Desert Biobedding, which gives them room to dig, and it's super fine, so if they were to eat it, it wouldn't cause any issues. Obviously, your leopard gecko, as an adult, isn't going to eat any substrate, but it's more natural, and I would definitely recommend that for an adult. But again, since this is a basic setup, we're going to be using paper towel. So because of the black strip of ventilation that helps close the enclosure doors, you can't see it, but I just taped down the thermostat probe. That way your leopard gecko can't move it and cause your thermostat to have a false reading. On top of the thermostat probe, you should put your warm hide. Obviously this goes on the warm side. This is where your leopard gecko is going to spend their time after they've eaten so that they can digest their food. Next, we'll add this super fun Impalo small jungle plant by Exoterra from Josh's Frogs. It's a plastic plant, which means it's pretty easy to clean, and it does look really nice, especially in such a simple enclosure. The next fake plant is this Silk Small Ruscus, also by Exoterra. Now it's time for the medium herp hotel. This is going to be our cool hide, which means it's going to be on the opposite side of the enclosure as the warm hide. I also got this small hide box from Josh's Frogs, and my camera stopped recording, so it didn't quite show me putting it in. You can see down in the bottom left corner, that little black thing, it's that hide, or obviously it's on the screen too. You can also see I forgot to show myself putting in the food and water bowl because my camera stopped recording too, so they're in there as well. And this right here is a Zilla half log hide that I actually had on hand, so it's going to be another hide because obviously you can have only 3 hides, but the more the better. So that's going to be in there as an extra cool hide, and Pippin, my leopard gecko, loves to climb in it. Next I'm putting in a segment from a Fluker's Reptivine's fake pothos. And I really like this fake plant. I know that technically it wouldn't be in the leopard gecko's natural habitat, but it looks really nice and it fits with the theme of the enclosure, so I put them in all sorts of enclosures. I have probably 4, if not 5 of these fake plants, so I really like them. And I am going to put another segment of that fake pothos from Fluker's above the black little hide, which I don't know if I've mentioned, but I have wet paper towel in there so that can be used as the humid hide, which will help her shed. Alright friends, it's time for a little mini tour of this enclosure. So back here we have one of the Exoterra fake plants, and then one of the herp hotels from Exoterra as well, which is the cool hide. And then we have the small Exoterra water dish. All of these are from Josh's Frogs. And then we have Fluker's Pothos Reptivines, and that hide over there is another Exoterra hide, but I can't remember what it's called. And then we have another Exoterra fake plant right there. And here is an Exoterra half log hide that I got from Pippin's enclosure, her original enclosure, and I had purchased it from Josh's Frog several months ago, so she really likes that. And then we have another chunk of the Fluker's Reptivine's Pothos. That's kind of a mouthful right there above the humid hide. There you can see the wet paper towels down below that I mentioned earlier. Since Pippin is a juvenile, the small size works well for her, but for an adult I would definitely recommend sizing up. Now up on top of her enclosure I have her UVB, which is an Arcadia Shade Dweller UVB. It is a small UVB which is perfect for leopard geckos, but we'll talk about that more when I talk specifically about lighting after this little tour. Well, Pippin has had a few minutes to settle in, and she does seem to be really enjoying it. She, if you can see here, is in her little herp hotel, which I think she is really enjoying. I'm going to give you one last little sweep of the enclosure. This Exoterra fake plant, this Fluker's fake plant, the Zilla herp hotel, I think it's a Zilla herp hotel, the Exoterra small natural water dish, this Exoterra hide, I can't remember, this log hide from Josh's Frogs, and the Fluker's Reptivine Pothos as well, and then her little humid hide from Vivarium Electronics. Now, it has been a few months since Pippin moved into this enclosure, and she is still really enjoying it. And, of course, thank you to Josh's Frogs for sponsoring this enclosure. Alright, it's time to talk about lighting, so I would get out a piece of paper and start taking notes because this can be kind of a complicated subject. No, I'm just kidding, you don't need to take notes because I have my care guide linked in the description at careguides.hunterhawk.com. See what I did there? Alright, let's talk about lighting. Leopard geckos are cathemeral as opposed to diurnal or nocturnal, which means that they are active just random spurts throughout the day and the night. Technically, they don't need their own specific light as long as there is a good day-night cycle from ambient light throughout the room Obviously, you don't want to place their enclosure in front of a window to give them that light because that can trap heat like a greenhouse effect and end up hurting your leopard gecko. But like, say they're in an office where they're gonna have light for 12 hours a day and darkness for 12 hours a day, that could work technically, but I would still recommend giving them their own dedicated light. If you choose to give your leopard gecko lighting, it should be UVB lighting. Now, like I mentioned in the diet section of this video, leopard geckos technically don't need UVB lighting, but it's always going to be beneficial to provide to them. If you choose to give UVB lighting, know that leopard geckos are a shade-dwelling species, and actually most of the basking they're going to do is through their tail. That's how they can feel safe and secure in their hide, but stick their tail out and absorb the UVB lighting and get all those benefits from it. If you're going to use UVB, you need to use a weaker UVB. They're not a bearded dragon that's going to spend all day basking. They're just going to get that benefit through their tail, like I said. I personally use and recommend the Arcadia Shade Dweller variety of UVB. It's a super awesome little kit, and it's best used 10 to 15 inches from your leopard gecko's basking spot. If the bulb will be over 15 inches from your leopard gecko's basking spot, you should use the Arcadia Forest D3, and it should cover about 2/3 of the enclosure. Now, Arcadia brand lighting is actually a little difficult to find in the United States, especially right now because they're a European brand, but there are 3 companies that consistently have it in stock. Those are Josh's Frogs, which obviously that's where I get mine. I use and recommend Josh's Frogs for getting all your reptile supplies. They are awesome. But there's also 2 others, which are Pangea Reptile and Reptile Basics. And so if Josh's Frogs is sold out, then you should go and check those sites because they will likely have it too. If you have any questions about your leopard gecko enclosure, definitely comment them down below and I will do my best to help. I love having conversations with you guys, and so if I can do anything to help, definitely let me know in the comments and I will try my best. Okay, so this next topic is the other important topics section of the video, which that's kind of a mouthful, but this is just all the miscellaneous stuff that doesn't exactly fit into its own section, but that I think it's really important for you to know before you get your leopard gecko. We're going to be covering various topics such as getting your leopard gecko, how to tame your leopard gecko, how much your leopard gecko is going to cost, and more. Let's start with finding the right leopard gecko for you. Now, it's very important to hear this, so please listen. Please do not get any leopard gecko or any animal for that matter from a chain pet store such as PetSmart, Petco, Petland, Pets at Home, any of those that are a chain. Their animals come from similar situations to puppy mills, but for reptiles, and they are really sad, and their animals are often really unhealthy, and they don't live a long time. I really wouldn't recommend it. I got my first leopard gecko from PetSmart because I didn't know that you shouldn't, and I definitely wish someone would have told me that before, because while I love Peyton to death, I really wish I wouldn't have supported that company to give them money to keep buying more reptiles, which they're gonna then neglect and abuse. It's a cycle, and we have to stop buying from them so that we can break that cycle. Additionally, there are a few morphs of leopard geckos that you should avoid. Now, a morph is their genetics that make up how they look, basically their size and their color pattern. So the morphs that you should avoid are Enigma and Lemon Frost, and most white and yellows. There are some white and yellow breeders that do it ethically, but if you're new to leopard geckos, don't get a white and yellow for your first leopard gecko. All Enigma leopard geckos and many white and yellows suffer from a neurological disorder that negatively impacts their motor skills. It causes them to be unable to navigate their enclosure, find their food in water bowl. Oftentimes they'll end up biting themselves when they're trying to hunt for their food. If they get tipped over on their back, they have no idea which way up and down is, so they'll just stay there until you help them. It's not good. It's really sad. So please, please do not get a white and yellow or an Enigma leopard gecko. So the reason people even breed those is because they do look pretty, and people who don't know that they shouldn't buy them are willing to pay a lot of money for them. And these breeders are like, okay, well, I can make a lot of money, so I'm going to breed it. I don't care if it has a neurological disorder. And that's the same with our next morph, which is the Lemon Frost leopard gecko. Lemon Frosts have something called iridophores. Well, actually every animal has iridophores, but lemon frost have super strong iridophores. Iridophores are the cells that produce pigment, but in lemon frost leopard geckos, those cells are selectively bred to be super strong, and there are way too many of them. And that means that all lemon frosts at some point in their life will develop cancerous tumors, and most of the time they can't live a full lifespan because they have so many tumors that they have to be put down, or they're unable to eat and they die. And so most leopard gecko breeders have stopped breeding them, but if you're looking for a leopard gecko and you see a breeder that breeds them, even if you're not going to buy a lemon frost from them, don't buy any leopard gecko from them, because you don't want to keep fueling that cycle, because they have no quality of life, because usually by the time they're a couple years old, they have cancerous tumors, and I don't see why anyone would choose to breed them anymore, but I guess there's money in it, and so some people are gonna choose to do it, even though it's very unethical. If you choose that instead of getting a leopard gecko from a breeder, you want to adopt one from a rescue, I would definitely recommend checking out Crimson Exotics. Crimson Exotics is a nationwide reptile rescue that I actually helped co-found in 2019. Across our 5 foster homes throughout America, we take in reptiles, including leopard geckos, that people are unable to take care of anymore or need new homes, and we make sure that they're healthy. Once we're sure that they're healthy and they've gone through the proper quarantine period, we will put them on the site where you can apply to adopt them. When it comes time for you to pick up your leopard gecko, you can pick it up at the foster home, or we can ship it to you using priority overnight FedEx shipping through a reptile shipping partner. We use the world-class best overnight shipping and world-class best materials and equipment to ship the leopard geckos or reptiles in general to make sure that it's perfectly safe. We've done a lot of shipments and it's very safe. I think it's awesome that we are able to help these animals from all around the country. So I would definitely recommend checking out Crimson Exotics if you're looking to adopt a reptile. Now, another great place to get your leopard gecko is a responsible breeder. Emphasis on responsible. Now, finding a responsible reptile breeder can actually be quite the long and involved process, so I made a whole video about finding responsible reptile breeders. It'll be linked up in, I think, that corner, the top right corner, and of course, Josh's Frogs, they have a variety of leopard geckos as well. I've gotten White's tree frogs from Josh's Frogs, and I know that all of their animals are healthy and captive bred, so I would recommend Josh's Frogs to anyone as well. Next, let's talk about budgeting for your leopard gecko. For the initial setup for your leopard gecko and all the supplies you'll need before you get it, not including the price of getting your leopard gecko, I would recommend budgeting between $250 and $400. Additionally, I would really recommend setting aside at least $300 for vet bills, because if your leopard gecko needs to go to the vet in an emergency, you want to be able to take them, of course, because that's your responsibility as a pet keeper, and exotic animal vets can be a little bit expensive. Now for the yearly recurring costs. Leopard geckos, once you have them all set up, they're not the most expensive reptile, but reptiles in general are a little bit expensive. That's for sure. For one leopard gecko, I would recommend budgeting between $100 and $200, probably closer to $200 per year on the recurring costs such as food, supplements, lighting, all that stuff that you have to get more than once. Okay, now how do you handle your leopard gecko? That is something that is super important to know. Basically, you just want to handle your leopard gecko gently. When you first get your leopard gecko, leave them alone for around 7 days in their enclosure, other than just checking on them, making sure they're healthy, and changing their water and giving them food, but you don't really want to handle them for the first little bit. Once you do start handling them, you want to pick them up, kind of like scooping them up from the bottom. I'll put a video of it on the screen, some B-roll, so that you can see an example of that. But this is of a leopard gecko that I have already tamed to be handled. I will have a video linked in the top right-hand corner right now, as well as in the description under the section that talks about videos that I've referenced, all about taming your new leopard gecko, because that's something that can be a big undertaking depending on your leopard gecko. Alright, we did it! In this video, you learned pretty much everything you need to know about taking care of your leopard gecko. I would definitely recommend reading my written care guides. They are linked in the description or at careguides.hunterhawk.com. I put a lot of work and time into them and make sure that they're super detailed for you, so if you want something to read along with or just to check out, definitely head there and read those care guides. I think they're great and you can definitely benefit from them. If there's a certain part of this video that you found super helpful and you're like, hey, I need to rewatch that, again, there's a table of contents in the description, so just click on the time and you will be able to rewatch it. In addition to this video, I have a whole playlist of Leopard Gecko videos, and I will have those linked at the very end of this video, so keep watching and you can click on that playlist for all sorts of Leopard Gecko videos. If you plan on shopping online for your Leopard Gecko, I would really appreciate it if you could use the Leopard Gecko shopping guide that I have linked in the description. All of those products can be purchased on Amazon or Petco or Chewy or Josh's Frogs. Like, I'll have just very specific links to stuff because I know some of this stuff can be hard to find, and for a lot of those products, if you do use that link, it gives me a few cents, which does add up when all of you use that, so I would really appreciate it. That's a great way that you can help support this channel so I can keep making these care guides. And if you do want to support the channel, again, you can check out my Leopard Gecko, I just dropped my script, but you can check out my Leopard Gecko collection, that is my Leopard Gecko Peyton on there, or the White's Tree Frog collection, that is Parker and Prada, the White's Tree Frogs, on there at shop.hunterhawk.com. If you have any other questions, like I said, comment them down below, because that way we can all learn from your questions and I will answer any of your questions that I can, and if not, I will find someone who can and put you in touch, because I think it's super important to make sure that you can all find the information that you need to give your Leopard Gecko the best life possible. Please remember that Leopard Gecko care is constantly evolving. In 2025, a lot of the information that you see in this video will be outdated, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, because we continue to learn, and that's the great thing about keeping reptiles. We're constantly learning. So what I'm saying is, even after you have your Leopard Gecko, continue researching their care, because there's always something new that you can learn to help make your Leopard Gecko's life just this much better. If you found this video helpful, definitely hit the thumbs up button, and it would mean the world if you could subscribe to my channel. I make lots of reptile and amphibian videos, and a lot of them are about leopard geckos, so I think that you will find my channel super helpful and informational and entertaining if you love leopard geckos too. Comment down below and tell me if you have a leopard gecko or if you're gonna get one, or just tell me what you think of leopard geckos. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. My name is Hunter Hawk, and I will see you next time. Good luck with your new pet leopard gecko, and bye-bye.